I'm Mike McCray, and today we're talking about pricing. The Morning Brew starts now.
Hi, I'm John Singh,
And I'm Mike McCray.
and welcome to the Morning Brew. So today we're talking about the number one question we always get asked, and that's, what is my home worth, or what is my property worth? And there's a lot of different factors that go into determining how much a property is worth, and let's go over some of those factors.
Well, of course, the first thing that you really see that everybody pretty much knows this, but it's location. Everybody, commonly says location, real estate. And yes, that's true to an extent, but it also has a lot of other factors. So location is obviously a major part because you want to have a property that is where a lot of people are going, because if there's a lot of people there, it goes back to supply and demand. The least amount of supply that an area has due to the rising demand of it, the more valuable your house is. So that'll sort of help us get into what CMAs are good for, or things of that nature. But definitely the location of your property. Not saying that depending on where you're at will affect the overall sellability of your house, but it does affect sometimes the value of what you can resell for. So definitely a major part of that is where you're located at, whether it's neighborhood specific or even city, or in a macro type situation where it's East Tennessee, for example.
Yeah.
So another part that's important to think about is the type of things that your property actually contains, and we call them amenities. It could be, such as a hospital being close by, restaurants, grocery stores, shopping. Those kind of amenities that are within so many miles of your house also can affect the value. Sometimes that's a little bit more difficult to quantify, but it does reflect in your location as a whole. So that's an important factor. But that is also a side of the location part of the pricing. Is what amenities do you have close by, gyms, all kinds of different aspects. Let's see, time of year is another one where we have all four seasons where we're at. We have times of year where people do not typically go out, search for property. There's obviously still people looking and still making offers and stuff, but it does die down quite a bit. Typically you see it slow down around November, December. People preparing for holidays or whatever.
Right.
Too cold, that kind of thing.
I do want to touch back on the amenities part. So a lot of that can be like granite countertops in a property.
Yeah.
Because, you walk into some properties, if it's, $100,000, $120,000, you wouldn't really expect to see granite countertops in that.
No.
But when you get into the $200,000 homes, you want to see granite countertops,
yeah,
or something equivalent to that.
Yeah, and then sometimes when you're going above your 350,000, granite's sort of like the standard, but you're also starting to run into houses that sometimes will have courts, and sometimes solid surface. There's lots of different types of amenities that will happen in certain price ranges. So like a house that may have granite that's priced around 120,000, for example, will probably sell a lot faster than a house that has the standard of, just Formica countertops or laminate countertops. So those finishings that are in each house, custom cabinets, hardwood floors, tile floors, or even on high-end homes, travertine, or in some cases slate, it goes beyond and above ceramic, for example, like what you would find in bathrooms, or linoleum, or there's different finishing. So it is, depending on what price range you're getting close to, depends on what kind of amenities you'd want to see minimum. And then, of course, whatever you have maximum can also increase the sellability of it. So basically just shortens your time on market.
So let's talk about, because I know we have a lot of confusion when it comes to inventory. How does inventory affect the pricing of homes?
So inventory, it goes back to the classic supply and demand. If you have more supply than there is demand, the pricing starts getting cheaper. When your supply is a lot less than the demand, then obviously you can command higher for your property. Now, I'm not saying that you can completely go out of your zone, because there's still some boundaries that you have to adhere to. But when you've got a lot of supply or a little bit of supply, that definitely increases your price, or it can decrease your price as well.
So one of the main tools as real estate agents that we use to help us determine what a home is worth it's called a CMA. What is a CMA?
So it's a comparative market analysis, and sometimes we'll look at them that can go back as far as 6 months. CMAs, or comparative market analysis, whenever we go through and do research on a house that we're looking to help list or even buy, we do these in order to justify whatever the price that we think it's going to be worth, or if it's already listed, what the house is actually worth versus what it's listed. So we get a ballpark with those. They're not an exact science. It's almost a little bit of an art form as well. And there's a lot of parts that go into that, and that also goes back into your absorption rate as part of your comparative market analysis. So an absorption rate basically gives you an idea of how many houses are coming on the market versus how many are selling, and it goes back 12, 6, and 3 months. And what that does, that lets us know if the market's slowing down or if it's speeding up. So that helps us judge the CMA a little bit better. But the CMA, we take apples to apples type situation. So if you have a 3-2, 3-bed, 2-bath home, and it's just a ranch style house, then we try to compare that to other houses of the same style, same size, within so many, I guess you could say, square footage. For example, you'll have a plus or minus amount of that square footage that we're searching in. So we try to get houses that are as close as possible to your house and within so many miles of your house, in order to get a good idea of what the market is currently, or has been, buying your style of property at. And what that does, that gives us a ballpark to start with to price it, because you don't want to be too expensive, because if you're priced too high, you'll just sit on the market. And we'll go into a little bit more detail on that a little bit later. But if you sit on the market too long, you'll just sit there, and it'll hurt you in the long run. But if you price it more in the zone of what people are buying at, or a little bit better, it's just like if you go to a store, and let's say you've got hypothetically a CVS and a Walgreens, and they're both selling Tylenol. One is selling it for $14.99 and the other one's selling it for $13.99. Well, which one are you probably going to go if they're the exact same bottle? Chances are you'll just go to CVS and buy it. So you want to price a house along the same lines with whoever else is listed besides you. So you want to be the better deal, which goes back to the amenities or the finishings of your house. If you've got better stuff, you could probably be more comparative, but you've got a better value. So chances are you'll get a buyer before the other people will.
Yeah, and I would like to note that, we're planning on doing an upcoming video on a listing consultation, but, we also take into consideration what your needs are. So if you need to get a certain amount out of your property, we take all that into consideration along with the comparative market analysis to figure out the best price to price your home. But you mentioned it a minute ago, days on market. How does that affect the pricing of a home?
So obviously you have a crowd mentality when you're dealing with the market. So if you have a property that sits on the market for, let's say, a long time in comparison to other properties, people will at some point start to wonder what's wrong with your house. Why has it not been off the market? Especially when they're comparing it to other properties that maybe they find on Zillow or whatever. Even though they don't understand necessarily how geographically specific a property can be, if you sit on the market for a long time or start getting to that point, it will start costing you in the long run for the value of your house, plus your carrying cost and all those other things that typically go in with owning a property. So there's a lot of hidden costs that it will cost you. So sometimes it's better to undercut your price, which we do price reductions regularly. But you want to make sure that you're staying ahead of the wave so that you can get the most amount of buyers into your property. Industry standard, as an average, is about 12 to 14 people that come look at your property. You're probably going to result in an offer, give or take. If you don't, there's a lot of formulas that we use on the back end, but basically, depending on how many showings you get, could depend on how much of a percentage that you are off price-wise and what the market's dictating. We as a team, we look at properties on a daily basis, so we constantly are watching the market. If we see the market starting to shift for certain properties that we have, we'll start talking to the owner and saying, hey, look, the market's starting to shift a little bit. Let's try to get ahead of the curve, and let's do a price reduction in order to, get more people into your property before it ends up, costing in the long run. So obviously we look at that market in that way, and days on market helps us do that. And it also helps us prevent massive loss of equity, in a property if you need to sell in order to gain that equity back. So,
yeah, those first 30 days are crucial, and that's why it's so important to price your home correctly from the start, because Zillow and some of those realtor, they give preferential treatment to new listings, but then they also do it again when there's a price reduction, because it notifies all the people that have looked at it and saved it that might be interested in it. So let's get away from the listing side. What are some things that buyers should consider when determining what purchase price to offer?
So in our particular case, and whether you're in our area of working or not, there's usually a buy to close ratio that your agent should be able to look at. So if they will pull that, you can get an idea of where people are listed and where they're getting offers to where they close. So, and it's just basically called a close to list ratio. So it could be 96%, it could be 97%, it could be 95%. In some places it could even be 102%. But in our particular case, we average anywhere between 95 and 97% of list. So whenever we are, as a buy side, whenever we're trying to make offers, obviously you want to account for some negotiating room. Depends on what your average time on market is. If the average time on market is under 30 days, before it goes under contract, you want to getting a little bit better of an offer versus that 95, 96, or 97% in our case. You want to make better offers than that, especially if it's a hot property, things of that nature. You want to probably get closer to list in order to get the property. But, when buyers are out there, you do a CMA on it, get the value of it to start with, to make sure that they're not completely overpriced or they're underpriced or whatever, to help you determine what to offer. So, you want to definitely try to keep in mind that there may be a lot of other people thinking the same way you do. But, we use the close to list ratio a lot to figure out what percentage should we be getting close to. Because it can be insulting, and if there was a possible deal, if you try to lowball somebody, you could shut off all capabilities of buying that property. Yes, you may occasionally hit a home run with it, but you'll also make a lot of people mad in the process, which isn't necessarily the problem. It's more that you're cutting your ability to negotiate, and because people are reacting on emotion versus common sense at that point. So, if you're trying to make a deal work, don't lowball somebody in order to try to get a better deal, because a lot of times it'll cost you in the long run. So buyers, as far as referring back to the question, when you are out looking or your agent's out looking for you, you need to make sure that you're within reason on your initial offers, because you could really shut yourself off from actually getting a good deal versus, not getting a deal at all or being homeless in some cases.
Yeah, usually when you get an offer, you've got three choices, and that's accept it, reject it, or counter it. And if you go in too low, a lot of times the seller will just reject the offer, and then you're completely out.
And if somebody else walks in and does a little bit better than you, and it could be over $1,000. You never know, because it's whatever that seller's situation is. If they've got a certain number that they have to walk away with, because let's say they're moving to another city or state or whatever for a job transfer, there may be a dollar amount that they have to walk away with in order to go buy something wherever they're moving. So if you go in and lowball somebody, you may end up hurting your chance of negotiating with that person over, like, let's say, a couple $1,000, which in the grand scheme of a 30-year mortgage is, only a couple bucks a month. It's not that big of a deal. So,
and another thing buyers need to consider is, are they going to ask for assistance with the closing costs and some of those things?
Yep. Yeah, those are some other aspects. There's so many ways to get money out of a deal and get a good deal still without really killing the purchase price or trying to make a killing off the purchase price. There's closing cost assistance. There's repair allowances. There's all kind, and depending on what kind of loan you get, there's all kinds of things that you can ask for or have done to the property that will save you money in the long run, or even increase the equity of it, even compared to what you're purchasing it for. So, there's lots of ways to get a good deal without trying to kill it on the purchase price all the time.
Yeah, I was reading an article not too long ago, and it was about pricing strategies, and I want to see what your opinion was. But it was basically breaking it down to three different options. So you can go in, a little bit above asking price, or above what you think the home's worth, and kind of see what happens. But you also have the risk of it just sitting on the market.
Right.
You can go in and use all the data and price it correctly, or you can even go in under value and hope for, competition to come in.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess it depends on what style of negotiator your agent is. I've done it actually all three ways for different clients, depending on what their needs were. I've actually been happily wrong before. I've actually listed a house that I thought, for example, I thought it should have been priced right around 155 or 160, and that's what the past data for closings had showed. And we ended up talking to the homeowner, and they wanted to price it about $5,000 more. So we ended up going in at, I think it was 160, 164.9 or something like that, which was a little bit overpriced for the area that we were in. But it turns out that that particular area all of a sudden had started getting really hot. Like, it was ridiculous on how many people showed that property. Like, they were constantly out of the property from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night every single day for a solid week. And they had actually asked me to stop showings at that point. But we ended up, and for our area, we're not like some of the areas where you can get multiple offers within 24 hours of a house being listed. But for that particular house, we ended up with 6 initial offers, and then we started whittling it down to about 4. So we had 6 offers sitting on the table, and we did a highest to best, and honestly, 2 of them dropped out when we did it. But then there was 4 more that all did a highest and best, and we ended up selling that house for a little over 170. It was like 172, I think. And I honestly didn't even think it was going to appraise for that, but it ended up appraising for it as well. So my clients got way more than what they were even thinking they could get out of it, and it was a beautiful home, well done. It had way more amenities than anybody else had, and finishings for the house. So it was a really awesome house, and yes, it was worth it to the buyers who bought it. But at the same time, it was way more than I thought. So us pricing it higher probably got them a lot more money than if we'd have priced it even initially where I wanted to. But I was happily wrong with that, because obviously we make a percentage off of, when we sell a house, we make a percentage off how much our sellers are getting. But The second strategy is pricing it right at the market, and that goes back to how many people are actually there selling because of the demand. If your demand is really, really high, go with it pricing higher a little bit over what you think it's worth. If it shows a trend if it's going to keep going that way, if it's going to be sort of stabilized or it's just got a steady growth for demand, then maybe pricing it where everybody's at, and just having maybe better finishings or something to that effect to just stand out from the crowd. But if you're going to price it lower, that's usually, unless your seller's got to really sell it fast, I would do that only when you see a decline in the trend. So if the demand's going down, price it less than everybody else so that you can get your house out first and get more money in the result. Because if the demand's dying, you could be sitting on a house for a year and there's a ton of negative cost to that. So just it depends on really everybody's individual situation. And what the market's doing, where they're at, even the sub-markets, the hyper sub-markets. So we definitely want to look at those kind of things depending on where people are at individually. If you like the video, make sure to hit a thumbs up. And also don't forget to comment down below if you'd like to have any input on future videos or have any questions about this video. And also, of course, definitely don't forget to hit that subscribe button and smash that bell.
This episode of the Morning Brew has been brought to you by the McCray Group, brokered by eXp Realty. Client focused, technology supported.